I exposed my wife's cheating with my twin brother and destroyed their scheme to steal my company while watching their entire empire collapse. Evan's disciplined 6'2" frame, the result of daily 5 a.m. workouts, stood rigid behind his modern steel desk. Across from him paced his wife, Tessa. She was 38, with glossy dark hair and an angular figure clothed in top-tier designer fashion. Her expression was defiant, her sharp features heightened by the furious flush on her cheeks. She was used to admiration and envy, but that day, no one would have recognized her smug confidence for anything other than venom. "Are you even going to speak?" Tessa snapped, her voice brimming with impatience. "You look at me like you're some grand judge, but you have no idea what I've gone through. You think your silent act makes you strong?" Evan was good at hiding emotion, so good that people often underestimated him, just as Tessa had. His steel-gray eyes flicked over her outfit. "My in-laws thought their prenup would protect my wife's $9 million lottery win, but I proved them wrong in court and my revenge cost them everything. And home-cooked meals." She belonged to a world of sleek cars, galas, and wealthy acquaintances who smiled politely but looked down on outsiders. That day, none of that mattered. Her laughter, her shining eyes, her dreams. I believed love could bridge any gap. "Can you stay longer?" she asked as we sat on a park bench near her estate, her name carved into the paint from childhood. It was before the engagement, before money complicated everything. Her father, Phil, a real estate mogul, and her mother, Myra, called M for short, a woman who hosted charity luncheons and flew to Europe for shopping trips. Meanwhile, I came from a quiet neighborhood where neighbors chatted over chain-link fences. My father, a retired teacher, and my mother, a part-time baker. We had no luxury, but we had enough, something her family would never understand. "I have an early shift at the sporting goods store," I told her. She pouted, leaning against me. "I just hate it when you leave." Her warmth in that moment made everything else fade. I didn't care about my dusty shoes or last year's jeans. I thought she loved me anyway. Our romance grew, but so did my awareness of her parents. Myra, poised and sharp, could silence a room with a glance. Phil, my father-in-law-to-be, was big in presence, if not in height, known for giving casual remarks that sounded more like threats. They tolerated me for her sake, but never hid their belief that a middle-class man wasn't good enough. "Congratulations," Phil said, shaking my hand stiffly the night we announced our engagement. "We're, happy for you both." "Thank you, sir," I said. "Just Phil is fine," he replied. "We'll see how all this works out." Those words rang in my ears, "We'll see how all this works out." A chill lingered, one I tried to ignore by focusing on my fiancé's radiant smile. He knew exactly how much it had cost. After all, he had paid for it less than a week prior. "I'm processing the situation," he said in an even tone. "You expect me to fall apart, but you haven't told me anything I didn't already suspect." Tessa's mouth twisted in anger. She planted her hands on her hips, displaying a sapphire ring on her left hand, the ring she had flaunted around town for a month. Evan had seen the jewelry receipt on his credit card statement. He knew it hadn't been a gift from him. "Fine," she said. "I'm ending this. Caleb, your own brother, makes me feel alive in ways you never did. He's more of a man, more exciting, more spontaneous. I'm leaving you for him." Evan let a stretched silence hang between them, cold tension filling the air. "You're leaving for my twin brother," he said, his voice so calm it was terrifying. "And you expect me to show regret? Are you waiting for tears or a breakdown?" "I'm waiting for a reaction," Tessa hissed. "But you stand there looking smug." Still, deep down, I sensed that these people saw me as an intruder into their world. A few days later, my wife-to-be and I visited her parents' house to set a wedding date. Myra and Phil sat us down at a polished mahogany table. Phil pushed a folder across the surface. "I have something I need you to sign," he said. Inside was a prenuptial agreement. It spelled out that any inheritance or trust funds that came from her family, properties, businesses, large gifts, would remain solely hers. Meanwhile, any major assets we acquired during our marriage, including lotteries or game show winnings, would be considered marital property. The sections about windfalls were suspiciously detailed, especially under the heading Financial Windfalls and Gains. They had practically zeroed in on the possibility of a jackpot scenario. My name was sprinkled through in formal legalese, the prospective spouse consents to. "Is this absolutely necessary?" I asked. "Caleb wants me with him, and he wants your share of the family engineering firm. Your parents are behind him too. They think he should have been the one to lead the company all along. They'll push you out. He's taking your place, your name, everything you think you've earned." Evan's gaze took in the trembling of her hands. He recognized it from the early days of their marriage, that slight shake whenever she was bluffing or half-lying while playing cards or orchestrating manipulations. Tessa had always loved playing mind games. "Then you have nothing left to discuss with me," Evan replied, his voice still level. "If you've chosen him, congratulations. Perhaps you'll enjoy the beach house he stole with embezzled funds. Make yourself at home there." She blinked. Clearly, she hadn't expected him to know about the laundering or the missing company money. For a moment, her eyes widened, but then her arrogant mask returned. "We'll be perfectly fine," she said, her voice rising. "Standard procedure in well-off families," Myra said, her voice smooth as silk. "You understand?" I glanced at my fiancée for support. She stood off to the side, her face unreadable. "I guess it's not a big deal," she said. "My parents just want to protect family assets. It won't change anything between us." I should have protested more, but I was deeply in love and anxious to keep the peace. I reasoned that if I genuinely cared about her, signing a few forms was no big deal. I pressed the pen to the paper, my signature forever binding me to the terms of an agreement I only half understood. As I signed, Phil watched me with an oddly triumphant half-smile. "Welcome to the family," he said. 6 months later, we had a lavish lakeside wedding. My parents were stunned by the extravagance. Imported flowers, a 5-tier cake, a live orchestra. I'd never seen my father so out of place. He wore his best suit, still looking uncomfortable under the scrutiny of distant relatives who kept asking, "So, how did your son meet her?" Caleb knows how to seize opportunities, unlike you with your tedious caution. Always so ethical, always by the book. You think you're superior, but guess what? Good guys finish last. "We'll see," Evan said, motioning toward the door. "If you're finished, I have a project that needs my attention. Take your final belongings, leave the keys. You've made your decision." Tessa hesitated, as if planning some cutting remark. Instead, she spun on her expensive heels and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Evan listened to her footsteps echo away, then the front door opening and closing. The engine of her luxury car revved, then faded into silence. When he was certain she had gone, Evan turned to his computer and opened a private email account. He typed a short, pre-written message to a special contact at the FBI's white-collar crime division, then hit send. Late that night, with a tumbler of whiskey in hand, untouched, Evan sat alone in his study. Despite the tension, the wedding photos showed a day of sunshine and laughter. My wife looked stunning in her lace gown, and I felt unstoppable in that moment, like we were forging a union of love stronger than any social or financial gulf. We moved into a condominium that Phil called a gift. In reality, he'd paid the down payment, but I was expected to cover monthly mortgage payments. My father-in-law didn't phrase it like an ultimatum. He simply said, "You'll handle the monthly bills, right, son?" And so I did, quietly ignoring the sense that I was paying rent on a place he still emotionally owned. Our first few years saw typical spats over money and parental interference. My in-laws would drop by unannounced, sometimes bringing new furniture that clashed with my style or rearranging the living room because their decorator suggested a better layout. I swallowed my irritation whenever my wife waved off my complaints. "They're just trying to help," she said. He stared at security footage on multiple monitors. He had installed the cameras long ago, anticipating corporate spies. Tessa, of course, had no clue how thorough he was, nor did she suspect his ability to track every intrusion into his office. He watched images of Tessa and Caleb sneaking into the house at 2 a.m., rummaging through locked cabinets. Other clips showed them stealing passwords, emailing files to each other, forging digital signatures, even rummaging through his personal safe. Tessa had always bragged that she understood him inside and out, that she could fool him any time, but arrogance was her greatest weakness. "They really thought I'd never see this," he muttered to himself. He had meticulously compiled months of evidence. His twin brother, Caleb, had orchestrated a grand scheme to siphon Evan's designs and sabotage him within the family firm. Tessa, lured by visions of wealth and excitement, had eagerly become Caleb's accomplice. I started noticing that everything about our life was an extension of their tastes, their control. But I told myself all couples have issues with in-laws. We'd get past it. One day I got a call at work from my wife. Her voice was trembling with excitement. "You won't believe this," she said. "I just won the lottery. I nearly dropped my phone." "Wait, what?" "I swear, it's real. $9 million. I bought a ticket at a gas station on a whim, and the numbers matched." "That's incredible," I said, visions of early retirement, travel, and philanthropic projects soaring through my mind. We had joked before about what we'd do if we ever became millionaires. Give some to my parents, buy a house not controlled by Phil, maybe even open my own business. I remember trembling with giddy excitement. Life was about to change. But as the days passed, the excitement wore thin. My wife became cagey about the money. She insisted we keep it quiet, especially from my side of the family. The two of them had planned everything, down to Tessa leaving Evan at the most psychologically opportune moment. "They think I'm boring, too quiet," Evan whispered, a flicker of cold amusement shaping his lips. They never asked themselves what secrets a quiet man might hide. He closed the video files and stood, posture rigid. A single email notification blinked. The FBI contact had replied, confirming a meeting in the morning. Evan would provide the first set of documents proving Caleb's embezzlement. The rest would follow in due time, once it produced maximum damage. Close to midnight, a timid knock sounded at the study door. Evan checked the security feed and saw Vivian Taylor, his friend of 20 years and the firm's legal counsel, standing there with her shoulders tense. "Come in," he said, not bothering to greet her formally. Vivian stepped inside. Her hair was disheveled, and her eyes were puffy from crying. She was a tall woman in her early 40s, usually confident in a boardroom or courtroom. Now she looked like a cornered animal. She said she was meeting with attorneys, people I'd never heard of, and assured me it was necessary to claim the money properly. "Shouldn't I come with you?" I asked. She shook her head. "These lawyers are used to big estates. You'd feel out of place. I'll fill you in after." That stung more than I cared to admit. Over the next few weeks, I felt increasingly pushed aside. Each time I asked about the lottery money, how it would be managed, whether we'd pay off the condo, she grew dismissive or simply said, "It's complicated." One dreary afternoon, I returned from work, feeling exhausted. The sporting goods store had been understaffed, and I had pulled a double shift. All I wanted was to collapse on the couch. Instead, I opened the door to find my wife and her Aunt Linda, rummaging through drawers, packing items into boxes. "What's going on?" I asked. My wife straightened up, her face set in a hard line. "I'm filing for divorce," she said. "Pack your things. I want you gone tonight." My heart plummeted. "What are you talking about?" "Evan," she began, "I need to explain something." "Caleb approached you to steal my patents," Evan interjected calmly. "He wanted you to create secret shell companies, right? So he could claim ownership of my earthquake-resistant designs. Don't tell me more, I already know enough." She looked at him, lips parted. "How could you possibly—" "The same way I figured out Tessa's betrayal," he said. "I pay attention." Vivian tried to regain some composure. "I was tricked," she insisted, her voice shaking. "He forged some documents. He said your parents wanted to restructure everything." "I didn't realize the extent. I expected better from you," Evan said, his voice clinical. "You served as my attorney at the wedding, introduced me to major investors, acted like a friend. But you sold me out for your own gain, for a bigger slice of the firm, correct?" "He threatened me," she whispered. Aunt Linda, tall and hawkish, swept a critical eye over me. "The condo's in her name, financed with her father's money," she said. "You have no right to stay here." I couldn't process it. The woman I loved, who had just won a multi-million-dollar lottery, was kicking me out. "Please," I said, "can we talk this through?" My wife pressed her lips into a thin line. "I'll have my lawyer contact you. Now leave before we call security." I felt my throat tighten. I'd been paying half the mortgage for years, but she acted as though it was entirely her property. I grabbed a few essential items, some clothes, a toothbrush, and walked out the door. My entire life unraveled in a matter of minutes. Shaken, I drove to my parents' house. My father opened the door, alarmed to see me with a duffel bag and a haunted expression. "What happened?" he asked. I choked out the words. "She won the lottery, filed for divorce, and kicked me out." My mother gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd ruin my reputation, tell the bar association I'd committed other ethical violations." "And so you decided to betray me," Evan said, bitterness underscoring each word. "Well, now you can pack up your files. I've already forwarded your involvement to the bar association. I wouldn't expect to keep your license." Vivian sank into the nearest chair, face pale. "Evan, please," she said, tears forming. "I've known you for 20 years. We were friends. You stopped being my friend the moment you conspired with my brother." He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Security, please escort Miss Taylor out. She's no longer welcome here." "Evan!" Vivian cried, but he refused to look at her. He kept his gaze on a closed-circuit feed showing her fleeing the house moments later. When the door finally slammed shut, he exhaled, still cold and resolute. The next morning found Evan arriving at Hart Engineering Group's downtown office, located on the top floors of a gleaming skyscraper he had personally helped design in his 20s. My father's eyes hardened, his jaw flexing. He stepped aside, letting me enter. That night, as my mother railed about my in-laws' snobbishness and heartlessness, my father took a calmer approach, anger simmering beneath the surface, but he stayed pragmatic. "You need an attorney," he said. "We have to see how that prenup affects everything." I buried my face in my hands. "That's the problem. Her parents insisted on it, so now I bet it leaves me with nothing." My father paused. "We don't know that yet. Let's find out." 2 days later, I found myself in a modest law office, the blinds casting striped shadows across the desk of my father's old friend, Mr. Carlson, a family law attorney. I slid the prenup across to him, explaining how Phil and Myra had insisted on it, how it specifically aimed to protect my wife's inherited assets. He flipped through the pages, then let out a soft chuckle. "They shot themselves in the foot," he said. My heart fluttered with hope. "What do you mean?" He pointed to a paragraph. The building was a testament to both creativity and precision, traits that his family, ironically, had always praised in Caleb more than in him. As he stepped onto the executive floor, employees halted mid-conversation, giving him uneasy looks. Word had spread that Tessa had left him. People whispered, some smirked, pitying him, while others looked uncertain, not knowing which heart twin was truly in control. In the glass-walled boardroom, his parents sat with Caleb. Robert Hart was an older man with crisp silver hair, once a strong figurehead but lately too eager to appease the more cunning members of his family. Eleanor Hart, refined and distant, had always placed social reputation above everything else. Caleb looked up, surprise etched on his face as Evan entered. "Brother," Caleb said, trying to sound cordial, "we weren't expecting you. Father wanted a private conversation regarding the firm's direction." "I'm sure," Evan replied, "but I have pressing matters. Someone's been stealing patented designs." They locked down inherited wealth, trust funds, and gifts from her family as separate property, but they also included a clause about any windfall acquired during the marriage being marital property. That covers lottery winnings specifically, unless it's stated otherwise. I stared, stunned. "They wrote that in?" He nodded. "Yes. They were so focused on preventing you from claiming her family's estate that they forgot to exclude lottery gains. Barring some bizarre judicial interpretation, you're entitled to a substantial portion of that prize." A wave of relief and anger collided in me. On one hand, I was outraged that they'd so callously tried to discard me. On the other hand, I realized I wasn't powerless. That same week, rumors began to circulate that my wife was living it up, and not alone. A mutual acquaintance mentioned seeing her around town with an old coworker named Scott. "FBI agents will be here soon. I thought it best to warn you." Caleb bristled. "You're paranoid. You bring in FBI agents over a business dispute? There's no theft. You're turning a personal problem into a federal problem," Evan said, cutting him off. "You might want a lawyer by your side, but I doubt Vivian can help you now." At that instant, 2 men in dark suits stepped through the boardroom doors, flanked by other agents. One produced a badge. "Special Agent Mills, FBI White-Collar Crimes Division," he said. "We have a warrant for Caleb Hart's arrest on suspicion of corporate espionage and embezzlement." The room froze. Robert shot to his feet, face reddening with anger. "This is an outrage," Robert said, rounding on Evan. "How could you do this to your own brother?" Evan regarded his father with a cool stare. "He's the one who decided to steal. I simply handed over the evidence." Caleb stood so quickly his chair toppled. "You've lost your mind," he shouted, fists clenched. Scott had worked with her at a marketing firm years ago, and apparently they'd reconnected around the time she won the lottery. My mother frowned when I told her. "You think she's been cheating?" I shrugged, feeling sick. "I don't know, but it sure looks that way, doesn't it?" An image flashed through my mind. My wife, once so demure and sweet, now traveling with this ex-coworker, newly flush with cash. Could that be the real reason she was pushing me out? I filed the suspicion away. I was already reeling from the eviction, the looming divorce. The thought of her cheating with an old coworker was like a final dagger in my chest, but I needed facts before I confronted her. My father-in-law, Phil, didn't waste time making his stance known. One morning, my phone buzzed with a private number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Listen," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "you'll never see a penny of that lottery money. You're a nobody, and I'll use every means to make sure you walk away with zero." There's no real evidence. "Father, Mother, stop these agents." But the agents stepped forward, reading him his rights and cuffing him. Caleb thrashed, glaring daggers at Evan. "You think this is over?" Caleb snarled, his voice trembling with fury. "I'll ruin you from behind bars if I have to." "I doubt it," Evan said softly. Eleanor Hart grabbed her husband's arm, her eyes wide with shock and fear, but neither parent could halt the arrest. They stood there, powerless, as agents led Caleb away. Evan moved to one side, letting them pass. He noticed, with detached amusement, that Caleb's expensive suit had begun to tear at the shoulder from the struggle. "We'll talk later," Evan told his parents. "We'll see what the board decides, especially concerning the millions of dollars missing from the company accounts." His mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. Robert sputtered, unable to conjure the usual paternal commands. They'd never seen Evan so calm, so methodical, so ruthless. "Actually," I said, forcing my voice to remain calm, "the prenup states something different." He let out a mocking laugh. "You think that matters? I have lawyers, and they know every judge in town. You'll be bankrupt from legal fees alone. Back off if you know what's good for you." I hung up, my hands shaking. Mr. Carlson had predicted intimidation tactics, and they were already in play. My father's advice echoed in my mind. Document everything. I typed up the details of the call, emailed them to my lawyer, and saved the voice message for the record. The tension escalated. My mother-in-law, Myra, approached me outside my parents' home 2 days later. She wore an impeccable designer coat, her hair pinned in an elegant twist, but her eyes gleamed with anger. "I have a proposition for you," she said, glancing around to ensure no neighbors were listening. "What is it?" She handed me a piece of paper that listed a dollar amount. It wasn't even enough to cover half the mortgage payments I'd already made on the condo. "Take this and walk away," she said. "You can't do this to our family," Eleanor finally managed. "You'd be surprised what I can do," Evan said, stepping out into the hallway. In another corner office, a senior project manager named Dean Langley watched the scene unfold from behind partially drawn blinds. He had long resented Evan for overshadowing him. Now, with Caleb arrested, rumors buzzed that Evan was dangerously unhinged. Dean placed a call to Tessa, who answered on the second ring. "What do you have for me?" she demanded, her tone arrogant and impatient. "I'm stuck in a hotel suite. I hate listening to reporters call me a traitor. I've gathered files on Evan's upcoming designs," Dean said, his voice low. "I can make it appear that he's made catastrophic errors. If the board believes he's a liability, he'll be forced out. That's exactly what I need," Tessa said, letting out an exasperated breath. "It's more than you deserve." I exhaled a humorless laugh. "You're joking, right?" Her brow furrowed. "You're from a humble family. This sum is generous for someone of your background. Why drag this through the courts? I tore the paper in half. No thanks. I'll see you in court." She scoffed, turning on her heel. "Ungrateful," she hissed, striding off to her waiting car. The engine roared, and she was gone. Meanwhile, I kept hearing rumors about my wife spending time with Scott, the ex-coworker. One day I ran into Angela, a mutual friend, at a coffee shop. "Sorry to pry," she said, "but are you two separated? I saw your wife with Scott at a fancy restaurant." They looked close. My stomach clenched. "They're probably just friends," I forced out. Angela sighed. They were holding hands. The floor dropped beneath me. She had likely been cheating, using the lottery win to cut me loose. I swallowed my anger. No public scene. Mr. Carlson filed a motion to freeze the lottery funds the next day. Caleb's gone. The family is in chaos, and the only way I'm getting anything out of this marriage is if I turn the blame back on Evan, make him look incompetent or even criminal. Then I can claim his meltdown caused all this, and I'll salvage some money in the divorce. "I'll show the board everything tomorrow," Dean replied, lips curving into a sly grin. "Then, if all goes according to plan, Evan gets axed, you get your slice, and I step into a leadership role. We can squeeze him out permanently." Caleb said Evan was paranoid, Tessa mused. "That might help your case. No one will trust a man who can't keep his mind steady." "Trust me," Dean said. "By this time tomorrow, the board will want Evan gone." They ended the call. Dean's face shone with smug satisfaction. He had no idea that, on Evan's hidden surveillance feed, every word was being recorded. In his personal office, Evan watched Dean's call in real time on another screen. Tessa's face appeared, pacing in her suite. She looked exhausted, but an icy determination shone in her eyes. My father-in-law's lawyers tried to block it and failed. We pursued a contested divorce, arguing the prenup clearly included all windfalls acquired during marriage. I had contributed financially from day one. At a preliminary hearing, I saw my wife again. She arrived with her parents and 2 attorneys, her expression distant, refusing to meet my eyes. Afterward, I stepped forward. She paused in the hallway, arms crossed. "How long?" I said quietly. She glared. "What do you mean?" "How long have you been with Scott, the ex-coworker?" Her cheeks flushed. "That's none of your business. So you were sleeping with him while I was working double shifts?" I said, my voice trembling with suppressed anger. She cast a quick glance at her father, who scowled from a few feet away, then leaned in, dropping her voice to a hiss. You have no idea what it was like being suffocated by your mediocrity. Scott understands me. He's successful, interesting. I was tired of waiting for you to catch up. My mouth went dry. Still so sure of yourself, Evan murmured, hooking a thumb over the phone's next message. A single text from Tessa blinked. I'll destroy you. I hope you realize you forced me to do this. He closed it with a few keystrokes. Evan pulled up a meticulously organized directory labeled Project Faithful. One by one, he opened files detailing every insider scheme Dean had run over the last few years. Kickbacks, shady deals, hidden accounts. Evan had known about these side hustles for some time. A cat bides its time before pouncing on unsuspecting prey. Tomorrow, he said quietly, he'll make his move, and I'll be waiting. That evening, he walked the deserted halls of Hart Engineering, stopping by the model room to check his scale prototypes. The faint hum of the air conditioning was the only sound. He ran a hand across a polished architectural mock-up. Years ago, he had been naive, believing family loyalty trumped greed. Yet, even back then, he had quietly collected data to protect himself. Now those precautions would serve him well. So that's how you see me? A stepping stone? She shrugged, lifting her chin in defiance. I see you as someone who doesn't belong in my world. Now, if you'll excuse me, don't expect me to walk away empty-handed, I said. You and your parents started this war. She narrowed her eyes. War? Really? Fine, see you in court then. With that, she spun on her heel, joining her parents. I stood, breathing heavily, the pain in my chest like a knife twisting deeper. Phil, furious at my refusal to yield, tried to sabotage me at work. He called the owner of the sporting goods store, my boss, and implied that if they didn't fire me, it might jeopardize some expansion plans. My boss, who had known me for years, simply told Phil to mind his own business. In response, I got an angry text from my wife. You can't keep mooching off decent people. Grow up and face the reality that no one wants you around. My father's done playing nice. I saved the text, forwarding it to Mr. Carlson. The next morning, the board convened in the largest conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city skyline. The mood was tense. Most board members had arrived early, whispering about the FBI's recent appearance. Evan entered with serene composure, taking a seat near the corner, flipping through documents on his tablet. Dean cleared his throat, connecting his laptop to a projector. Thank you for assembling, Dean said, adopting a grave expression. We need to address a critical concern regarding Mr. Evan Hart's engineering calculations on our new earthquake-resistant bridge project. Slides filled the screen, showing complicated stress analyses with bright red annotations. As you can see, Dean continued, these figures are dangerously off. If we move forward with these plans, there could be catastrophic failures. Loss of life, lawsuits. He trailed off, letting the horrifying implications sink in. Board members looked alarmed. I refused to engage in a text war. My father's voice echoed in my mind, document everything and don't stoop to their level. Weeks crept by. The stress consumed me, yet I clung to the knowledge that the law was on my side. Behind the scenes, my lawyer scoured every line of the prenup, highlighting the clause that read, all financial windfalls acquired during the period of marriage. This includes but is not limited to monetary prizes. Lottery winnings, game show prizes, shall be deemed marital property and subject to equitable distribution unless specifically excluded within this document. They meticulously excluded inherited wealth, trusts, and family gifts, but ironically, they never excluded lottery winnings. It was a glaring oversight. Their obsession with protecting the family estate had inadvertently left a trapdoor open. Meanwhile, rumors of my wife's relationship with Scott spread like wildfire. They were seen at clubs, fancy hotels, and exotic restaurants. Tessa, who had somehow managed to be present despite her personal disgrace, feigned shock. Evan's been under emotional distress, she said, her voice heavy with pretended sincerity. I hate to say it, but Caleb always warned that Evan might be unstable. Dean nodded solemnly, pressing forward. For the safety of the company, we need to remove Evan from active design work, possibly from his position entirely. There's no telling how long these errors have been going on. He clicked to the next slide, but the projector flickered, revealing a corrupted file symbol. A sudden hush fell over the room. Then the lights in the boardroom brightened, and a new set of slides replaced Dean's doctored ones. These displayed bank transfers, offshore accounts in Dean's name, and emails detailing bribery. Dean's face lost color. What is this? He stammered, yanking at the laptop cable. Evan stood. "It appears we have an unexpected slideshow, Dean," he said, his voice crisp. My mother asked me if I'd considered using that infidelity as leverage in court. Mr. Carlson shook his head. "Our state is no-fault divorce, so her cheating doesn't necessarily guarantee you more money. The real gem is that prenup. That's all you need." I realized it wasn't about revenge alone. It was about not being bullied into walking away with nothing. The final court date loomed on the horizon, a black cloud threatening to unleash a storm of legal showdowns and personal vendettas. 1 week before that dreaded day, my phone buzzed in the dimness of my parents' living room. It was nearly midnight. I had just finished sorting through endless stacks of documents with my lawyer and was dozing off in an armchair. I glanced at the caller ID. It was my wife. We hadn't spoken directly in weeks, ever since she'd had me thrown out of the condo. My heart hammered with mixed rage and curiosity. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Hey," she said. "I'd suggest you start explaining your own figures. Like these $200,000 transfers from contractors to your personal account in the Caymans. I wonder how the FBI might interpret such data." Several board members exchanged shocked glances. "Dean," one of them said, voice trembling with anger, "is this for real? We had no idea." "This is a setup," Dean gasped, eyes darting. "Evan's framing me. He's paranoid, making up stories." Suddenly, men in dark suits entered. One stepped forward, holding up a badge. "Special Agent Nelson, FBI," he said. "Mr. Langley, we have evidence of fraud and illegal kickbacks under your management. You're coming with us." Dean shoved back his chair, attempting to flee, but the agents wrestled him into handcuffs. His face burned red as he screamed at Evan. "You bastard! You set me up! You're the villain here, if that's what you want to call it," Evan said with a detached shrug. Tessa glanced around, dread dawning in her eyes. She slipped toward the door, but Agent Nelson motioned for her to stop. "Mrs. I heard an odd tremor in her tone, as if she were forcing herself to sound calm. "Can we talk?" My stomach twisted. "Talk about what, exactly?" She hesitated, exhaling a shaky breath. I don't want things to get too messy in court. Maybe we can settle this ourselves, come to some arrangement that's fair for both sides." Her words made me laugh bitterly. Fair for both sides? She and her parents had tried to bury me from day one, kicking me out, labeling me a parasite, claiming the lottery ticket was hers alone. Now she wanted to speak of fairness? "Define fair," I said, my voice colder than I intended. She let out a quick, impatient sigh. "We can keep this private. Sign an NDA or something so the media or our social circles won't sniff around. You'll get some money, more than we offered before, but obviously a lot less than what your lawyer is pushing for. That way, we can keep my parents out of the spotlight, and you can walk away safe." So this was the latest hush money bribe. "Hart, we'd also like to speak with you regarding certain design thefts you may have aided," he said, not quite placing her under arrest, but making it clear she was a person of interest. The board sat in stunned silence as Dean was hauled out, cursing, tears rolling down his cheeks. Tessa's face lost its arrogant composure, replaced by a flicker of real fear. "I might need a lawyer," she said, swallowing hard. Evan calmly turned off the projector. He faced the board, whose members looked rattled. "We have real calculations, here," he said, tapping a thick binder, all verified by independent experts, pristine and safe. "There are no errors, as you'll see once you read the genuine reports. My designs are sound. It's the sabotage that wasn't." That same afternoon, Evan received frantic texts from Robert and Eleanor, summoning him to the family mansion. He arrived to find them in the foyer, pacing anxiously. They had once lived in regal comfort, hosting galas and fundraisers. A small wave of relief flickered in me, confirming they still feared the final verdict. But I felt my anger surge. How dare she believe I'd jump at another lowball offer? "No thanks," I said. "I'm done negotiating behind closed doors. We'll see what the judge says." She drew a sharp breath. When she spoke again, her voice brimmed with scorn. "You're an idiot. Do you have any clue what my parents can do to you? If they pull every connection they have, you'll never work in this city again, or any city within 300 miles. My old fear flared, yet I pressed my lips tight and forced myself to remain firm. "I guess I'll take that risk," I said. "Goodbye." I hung up before she could retaliate. My hand shook for a moment. Doubt gnawed at me. Was I making a colossal mistake by refusing her final offer? I pictured myself blacklisted, jobless, maybe forced to relocate. But then I remembered the humiliation, the arrogance from her father, and the way she had thrust me out of my own home. Now the house felt stripped of that usual glamour, as though the tension had stained every elegant marble tile. "Evan," Robert barked, "what have you done? Caleb's facing serious prison time, and the FBI is tearing apart the firm's records. Yes, Eleanor added, wringing her hands, and they're talking about tax irregularities, mentioning us. Our lawyers say we may have to give sworn statements. Evan regarded them without warmth. Why are you surprised? Caleb siphoned millions. You both turned a blind eye, awarding him secret shares while ignoring my warnings. You never offered me support. Now the government is asking questions you can't answer. He's our son, Eleanor exclaimed. We were just helping him succeed. We never thought you'd betray him to the authorities. You're his twin. He betrayed me first, Evan replied, his voice darker. And you helped him do it. Did you think the IRS wouldn't uncover those hidden shares you transferred to him? The law is quite unforgiving about unreported assets. Carlson, my lawyer, had insisted we were on solid legal ground. We had the prenup's exact wording to protect us. If they tried to stall, the judge would see right through it. With that thought, I steadied my resolve. No more fear, no more bowing down. I was in this fight until the end. The morning of the final hearing arrived, draped in low gray clouds that threatened rain. I slipped on my best suit, charcoal gray, hardly designer, but it fit me well enough. My mother fussed over my tie, telling me in hushed tones, "We believe in you." Outside the courthouse, I met Mr. Carlson. We exchanged a grim nod. My parents hovered a few steps back, offering moral support but letting me handle the fight that was ultimately mine. The courthouse lobby buzzed with tension, men and women in suits, attorneys checking their phones, a clerk calling out names. I spotted my wife, exquisitely dressed in a tailored blazer and pencil skirt, sitting on a bench near the hallway. Her father stood behind her, arms crossed, lips drawn tight. Robert's face went from red to pale. "Evan," he said softly, "we're a family. You can't just let your mother and me be publicly humiliated. This could destroy our reputation. We'll lose our standing in every social circle we've built for decades." "That's exactly what's going to happen," Evan answered, his calm gaze never wavering. "I'm not offering any help. You chose to side with him. Now you face the consequences." "We're old," Eleanor wept. "We can't start over if the authorities seize our assets. The media coverage alone." "You should have considered that earlier," Evan said. "You treated me like a commodity, easy to manipulate. You put your faith in the wrong son. Now you'll lose everything." He turned to leave. His father grabbed his arm, tears brimming in the old man's eyes. "Don't do this," Robert pleaded. "We beg you. We never meant to push you aside." Evan gently pried his father's hand away. "You'll hear from the IRS soon. I suggest you find another lawyer." Her mother was there too, whispering something in her ear, occasionally shooting me a venomous glare. They had 4 attorneys milling around them, rummaging through thick leather briefcases and comparing notes. My wife shot me a dismissive glance, then quickly turned away, flipping her hair with an arrogant flick of her wrist. In that moment, I felt like the villain of the story she'd likely told everyone. The freeloading, money-grubbing husband refusing to let her live her life. "Come on," Mr. Carlson said quietly. "Let's get inside." The courtroom felt colder than I expected, with rows of stiff wooden benches facing the judge's elevated seat. I took my place at the petitioner's table, Mr. Carlson at my side, while my wife and her squad of attorneys spread out at the respondent's table. The bailiff called the session to order, and a stern-faced judge, a woman in her 50s with silver, streaked hair pinned up, rapped her gavel. "Vivian's in enough trouble of her own." He walked out, ignoring his mother's sobs. A trace of bitterness gnawed at him, but he reminded himself of every slight, every time they dismissed his accomplishments in favor of Caleb's empty bravado. Justice had arrived, and it wasn't gentle. Tessa was at a swanky hotel bar that evening, still dressed in the same designer outfit but looking worn around the edges. She had ordered 2 glasses of overpriced champagne and kept checking her phone, hoping to salvage any piece of her old life. Evan surprised her by taking the bar stool next to hers. Her eyes flicked with a mixture of annoyance and relief, like a gambler hoping for one last chance to come out on top. "Hello, Tessa," he said coolly. She shot him a sideways glare, then pretended to calm herself. "I have nothing to say to you," she said, lifting the champagne flute and drinking deeply. "You told Dean you'd destroy me if I didn't see reason," Evan replied. "Now he's in custody, along with my brother. We're here to determine the equitable distribution of marital assets. In the divorce proceedings of..." She read our names, scanning our faces. I steeled myself, ignoring the knot in my stomach. My wife's lead attorney started with the same tired refrain. "The lottery ticket was purchased independently with her personal funds," he claimed, "and the money was never intended to be shared." Mr. Carlson stood, voice calm. "With respect, Your Honor, we have clear bank records. My client's wife used a joint debit card, both names on the account, to buy the ticket. Additionally, the prenuptial agreement explicitly includes lottery winnings as marital assets. At that, the judge lifted a brow. She motioned for Mr. Carlson to hand up the relevant documents. I watched my father-in-law's face twitch with annoyance. When my wife finally spoke, her voice carried a sharp edge. I never intended to cheat him. My parents were just extremely worried about opportunists coming after me. I was under pressure, and things escalated. I'm sorry if it felt abrupt. Yet here you are. Care to share how you plan to keep that promise? She set the glass down. I should have known you were always a snake, she said, her voice trembling with frustration. So quiet, so smug. You think you've won, but you've destroyed your own family. You're monstrous. I warned you never to cross me, Evans said, leaning in slightly. You assumed my silence made me weak. Tell me, do you regret your choice of partner? You want to see me on my knees begging forgiveness? Tessa hissed. I'd rather die. I'll never beg you for anything. He watched her eyes dart about, noticing that nobody in the bar was paying attention to them. He gave a small, chilling smile. Suit yourself, he said. The divorce settlement is final. You walked away with almost nothing. The firm's about to blacklist you from any future dealings, and the money Caleb promised you is gone, tied up in legal fees for his defense. You can't leave me penniless, Tessa spat, trying to hide her panic. Felt abrupt? She tossed me out onto the street with no warning. I clenched my jaw but said nothing. The judge studied her over the rim of her glasses, unimpressed. Then her father's lawyer took a more aggressive tack. I was the unscrupulous villain, Your Honor. This man contributed almost nothing to the household. He was reliant on my client's father's generous down payment for their condo. He was, in essence, freeloading off her family's wealth. We ask that the court recognize he has no rightful claim. Freeloading. The word stung. Mr. Carlson calmly fired back. We have receipts for monthly mortgage payments, utility bills, groceries. My client paid thousands over the years. He certainly didn't freeload. In fact, he contributed far more than they admit. We spent hours lobbing evidence back and forth, the tension in the air electric, every claim met with a rebuttal. My wife's gaze turned increasingly hostile. I felt the hateful glare from her parents like daggers in my back. I have years invested in your success. I supported you. I built you. You built nothing, he replied coldly. You pranced around on my dime, flaunting your shallow ambitions, and now the credit cards are cut. You've lost everything. But don't worry, I've arranged that if you ever try to tell all about me, you'll be sued for defamation. Your name alone is worthless, and any story you try to sell about my personal life will earn you a lawsuit you can't afford to fight. Tessa's manicured hand trembled around the champagne flute. You're a monster, she said again. I underestimated just how cruel you could be. I'm only as cruel as you forced me to be, he answered, standing up. Enjoy your evening, Tessa. The hotel bill's on you. He turned and left, ignoring the wave of angry tears that spilled down her cheeks. He had wanted to see if she had a last trick up her sleeve. She didn't. Days bled into weeks. By late afternoon, the judge rapped her gavel lightly. I want quiet in this courtroom, she said, her voice firm. Papers rustled as attorneys paused their frantic note-taking. She picked up the prenuptial agreement with a wry twist of her lips. In reviewing the language here, she said, It is quite clear that any financial windfall arising during the marriage is considered marital property, subject to equitable distribution. This court sees no ambiguity in that. Therefore, the lottery winnings in question are indeed a shared marital asset. A hush fell over the room. My father-in-law's jaw clenched. My wife blinked rapidly, color draining from her face. The judge continued, turning her gaze on my wife. Additionally, you evicted your spouse from the condominium with no formal notice or due process, despite his financial contributions. This action was both unkind and legally relevant to the question of fairness. I caught a faint smirk from Mr. Carlson, though he hid it well. Caleb's case escalated. More evidence surfaced. Shell companies, falsified ledgers, bribes to city officials. Tessa fell deeper into debt, hounded by reporters. Robert and Eleanor found themselves in the middle of a tax evasion scandal that threatened to strip them of every luxury they had ever owned. Vivian lost her law license and faced possible criminal charges for helping Caleb set up fraudulent transfers. Evan rarely slept more than a few hours, spending his nights coordinating with federal investigators. He fed them every hidden detail, every email thread. The more he revealed, the harsher the legal storm became for his enemies. In quiet corners of the city, Tessa tried to find new benefactors, new men to trick, but each time her reputation preceded her. She found doors slammed in her face. She made desperate phone calls to old friends, some of whom had once idolized her. None would lend her the money she needed to maintain her designer life. The judge's next words sealed everything. Therefore, the court rules that the lottery winnings shall be subject to an equitable split, with a substantial portion awarded to the petitioner. She glanced in my direction, then added, "Furthermore, the petitioner is entitled to reimbursement for his share of the mortgage, utilities, and other marital expenses he covered." It was everything we had hoped for. Relief flooded me, but I kept my expression neutral. The judge's hammering final words echoed through the quiet. "We will reconvene if needed for final calculations, but that is my ruling." Court adjourned. She slammed the gavel and the bailiff called, "All rise." We stood, my knees feeling weak. The war was effectively over. As soon as the judge left, the courtroom exploded into a murmured uproar. Reporters, the few who had gathered outside for local gossip, pressed forward, trying to peer into the doors. My father-in-law marched up to me, his face an alarming shade of red. Meanwhile, in prison, Caleb fought to get bail, fought to reduce charges, fought for a moment of freedom, but each new hearing brought more damning revelations from Evan's files. The evidence was incontrovertible. 3 months later, Evan made an unannounced visit to the county jail. He stood in a small, cramped visiting chamber with fluorescent lights. Across from him, separated by thick glass, sat Caleb, wrists chained. "You," Caleb said, his voice rasping with anger. "Why are you here? Come to gloat?" "Maybe," Evan said, slipping into the chair opposite his twin. They shared the same sharp facial structure, the same height, but everything else was vastly different. "I'm not signing any plea," Caleb growled. "They claim I can reduce my sentence by cooperating. Screw that. I won't sell out Mom and Dad just to get a shorter term." "You mean you can't," Evan corrected. "The feds already have enough on them, thanks to certain documents I provided." Caleb let out a hollow laugh. "Your sense of loyalty is twisted. Those are our parents. You destroyed them, destroyed me, humiliated Tessa." "This isn't over," he hissed. "You have no idea what we can still do. We'll appeal. I squared my shoulders, letting the swirl of resentment and triumph mingle. "It is over," I said. The judge decided. My wife stood off to the side, arms wrapped around herself, tears brimming in her eyes, but they looked more like tears of rage than sadness. My mother-in-law glowered from behind, whispering sharply at her daughter. Mr. Carlson gently touched my arm. "We should go," he said. "Leave them to their meltdown." But before I could turn, my wife suddenly launched herself at me, her expression twisted. An animalistic sound tore from her throat. You worthless scum," she shrieked. "You ruined me." She swung her purse, aiming for my shoulder. I managed to duck, but not before she clawed at my sleeve. The bailiff and a security officer rushed forward, trying to intervene. "Ma'am, you need to step back," the bailiff commanded. Her father, stunned, barked, "What are you doing? Stop it." "You have no heart, Evan." "An interesting accusation," Evan said, his voice measured. "You committed fraud, tried to bury me. You seduced my wife, or maybe she seduced you, doesn't matter. You conspired to take everything I built, and you expected me to roll over." He leaned closer to the glass. "I'm just better at finishing what you started, and I don't stop until it's complete." "You're insane," Caleb said, eyes burning. Evan rose. "Enjoy your time here. You'll have years to think about how you underestimated me." Caleb stood, rattling his chains. "You bastard. I'll never forgive." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Evan cut in, turning away. "You're nothing to me now." He left the visitation area, the guard slamming a metal door behind him. For a moment, the finality of it all felt weighty, but then the old anger lit his chest again. His brother's fate was sealed. Hard engineering faced scrutiny, but Evan cooperated fully. But she was beyond reason. Tears streaking down her cheeks, spitting fury. "You think you've won?" she yelled, her voice echoing in the high-ceilinged chamber. "You're just a parasite who fooled everyone into believing you were decent, you disgusting, gold-digging liar." I stumbled backward, adrenaline spiking. I'd never seen her this unhinged, not even during our worst fights. My mother gasped in horror from across the aisle. Mr. Carlson slid in front of me, arms slightly raised as if to shield me. A security officer grabbed my wife's arm. "Ma'am, calm down, or we'll have to remove you." She struggled, her face contorting with rage. "Let go," she screamed. "He's stealing my money. How can you people allow this? Do you know who my father is?" The officer tightened his grip, forcibly pulling her away from me. "Enough," he said. "Court's over. We don't tolerate violence here." My wife's attorney scrambled forward, holding up his hands. "Your Honor," but the judge had already departed. Loyal board members were rewarded. Those who backed Caleb or Dean were fired, indicted, or fled. He restructured the firm, tightened security, and helped expose a corporate corruption ring, earning praise from the FBI. A year later, he stood at the unveiling of his earthquake-resistant bridge, a sleek marvel spanning the city's river. Cameras flashed as officials called him the genius behind the design. Accepting a plaque, he simply dedicated the project to integrity and engineering. No one knew how close he had come to losing faith in those ideals. Meanwhile, Tessa drifted through cheap apartments, unable to maintain her old lifestyle. Her desperate messages piled up. "We need to talk. I'm sorry, please help me. I can explain why I did it." Evan never replied. His parents, forced to sell the mansion, begged for support. He ignored them. They had chosen their favorite son, a criminal. Vivian was disbarred, drowning in debt. If she ever tried to rebuild her career, Evan ensured the ethics board had everything needed to keep her out. Another clerk rushed in, appalled at the commotion. In a swirl of suits and confusion, my wife was restrained, continuing to hurl insults at me. Her father looked aghast, caught between wanting to protect his daughter and not wanting to cause a bigger scene. My mother-in-law pressed a hand to her mouth. The bailiff, motioning for more security, barked, "She's assaulted him in open court. That's contempt. She'll have to answer to the judge." My wife spat on the ground, trembling with rage. "He's the one who used me. He married me for money. He's the villain, not me." I could only stare, heart pounding. In that moment, I realized how far gone we both were, she with her arrogant meltdown, me with my seething anger. We turned into caricatures of a broken marriage, a violent spectacle for all to see. Security hustled my wife out of the courtroom, pulling her toward the hallway where the judge's chambers were located. I heard shouts, muffled by the thick walls, as she presumably argued with the officer. Although Evan's vengeance seemed complete, certain rumors indicated Tessa might still be searching for a final shot at him. Word reached him that she'd contacted shady private investigators, hoping to uncover secrets that could blackmail Evan. Realizing she hadn't learned her lesson, Evan decided to deliver a more punishing blow. A quiet arrangement was made with several security consultants and 2 ex-military operatives who specialized in legal intimidation tactics. They documented Tessa's attempts to break into corporate properties, forging keys or bribing staff to access restricted areas. One rainy night, Tessa actually tried to slip onto a construction site for Evan's new building, presumably to find something incriminating. She ended up cornered by 2 men in black tactical gear, part of Evan's private security team. They seized her camera, rummaged through her notes, and found nothing but desperate fantasies about bringing Evan down. "Let me go!" she shrieked, heart pounding. My father-in-law trailed after them, waving his arms and demanding they release her. Mr. Carlson exhaled. That was unexpected. I swallowed, my throat dry. She lost it. We waited on the benches for what felt like an eternity. Meanwhile, my mother approached, tearful and shaking. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said, though my voice sounded hollow in my ears. Minutes later, a stern-faced bailiff informed us that the judge had pronounced an immediate contempt citation. My wife would be required to pay a substantial fine for assaulting me in court. She was also ordered to remain in custody until she could be processed, albeit briefly, for her outburst. They weren't pressing further charges, the bailiff said, eyeing me. "Do you want to file an assault charge?" I hesitated. Part of me was enraged enough to consider it, but another part felt an odd pity. She was lashing out because of her own mistakes and arrogance. "No," I said at last. "No formal charge." "You're trespassing," one of the men said coldly. "We have enough evidence to press charges." "How do you think a new felony will look on your record, Miss Bowen?" She stood there, drenched, trembling. "I'll do anything," she whispered. "Don't arrest me. If you come near Mr. Hart's property again," the man warned, leaning in close, "we'll make sure you're locked up for years." They dumped Tessa onto the sidewalk, soaked and sobbing. By dawn, Evan had the security footage. He watched it once, then archived it, ready in case she ever tried another stunt. 2 years later, Caleb was sentenced to 10 years. Robert and Eleanor pleaded guilty to tax violations, stripped of their status. Vivian's appeals failed. Dean served time for fraud. Tessa faded into obscurity. Each holiday, Evan received hollow apologies from his parents. He tossed them into the fire. Tessa's desperate emails claimed she was manipulated, blamed Evan for being cold, begged for money, shelter, anything. He deleted them all. "The court's reaction is enough," the bailiff nodded. "Understood." A few days later, after the dust settled, my wife was released. Her attorneys quietly moved to finalize the settlement, avoiding further embarrassment after her public breakdown. Word had spread through legal circles, even reaching minor tabloids. She avoided serious charges, but her reputation was in ruins. On a gray afternoon, I arrived at the attorney's office. My father-in-law glowered. My wife sat stiffly, eyes puffy, avoiding my gaze. The arrogance was gone, replaced by silent defeat. Her mother hovered nearby, whispering to their lawyer. They handed me the final documents, a large lump sum from the $9 million lottery, in full release of condo claims. I signed without hesitation. Mr. Carlson reviewed every page before sliding me the pen. "Congratulations," he murmured. My ex-wife's lips tightened. Her father shoved a check across the table. "Take it. Hope you're happy." I glanced around. My ex stared blankly, lost in thought. Evan expanded Hart Engineering, building a reputation for innovation and quiet, ruthless efficiency. No one dared cross him again. 5 years after Tessa's departure, Evan was named Engineer of the Decade. The ceremony was grand, filled with powerful figures, but not a single face from his old life. "Mr. Hart," said a reporter from a local news station, shoving a microphone in his face, "you've had tremendous success. What would you say is your guiding principle?" Evan allowed a calm smile. "Proper foundations," he said. "In engineering and in life, if you don't build from a place of truth and strength, everything collapses." After the ceremony, he returned to his newly constructed penthouse overlooking the city. During the ride in his private elevator, he scrolled through messages. One arrived from the private investigator he'd hired long ago to keep tabs on Tessa. When the last signature was in place, the attorneys nodded. The settlement was done. No one said goodbye. The investigator had discovered she was now in a small desert town, working part-time at a realtor's office that specialized in low-budget foreclosures. She was, by all accounts, miserable. "Serves her right," Evan said under his breath. He recalled the times Tessa had mocked him for spending so many late nights studying advanced engineering texts instead of taking her on exotic vacations. He remembered how she'd complained about his boring approach to everything, how Caleb was more daring, more passionate. But neither Tessa nor Caleb had ever understood what real dedication meant, how methodical planning could transform an unassuming man into an unstoppable force.